Good afternoon and welcome to the last in our series of our webinars. So today we're going to be looking at matching and how we match transactions. So this session is going to be recorded and should last approximately about 30 minutes. So my name's Karen Carbon and I'll be guiding you through all of the matching steps today. And if you need to contact our support department, I have got our details up there for you. So what type of transactions will we be looking at today? So matching customer and supplier transactions, how we match bank transactions, looking at our allocation rules, and also if you've matched something, how do I undo that matching? Okay, so we're going to start by going through a demo presentation. Okay, so on my desktop, you will notice that right at the top, I've got these tiled icons. Okay, so this is going to be in advance of the new launch of favourites. So once your favourites does become available to you, it's very easy to just get that flow of work. Okay, so the easiest way to start adding these tiles onto your screen is just over on the right hand side you have an edit button. So if you click the edit button, it will come up with plus tile. So I know one area that I do visit quite a lot is provisional transactions. So if I just click on the plus button, and where it's got search, I can actually start typing in provisional transactions. Okay, so it will narrow down my search of my list, and you can see that it's given me the hyperlink, transactions, provisional transactions. And all I need to do is to select and click save. And that tile now appears for me on the screen and I can click done. Okay, so let's look at how we match some transactions. So first of all, we're going to have a look in our cash and banks area and just do some allocations from our electronic bank statement. So if I go over to the left hand side and click on cash and banks, and then under bank statements, I can see that I have my bank information in front of me. And I'm going to choose to look at my bank statement dated the 28th of the 2nd. So once more, I'll click into the magnifying glass and I can see that I've got a couple of customers and one supplier that I need to match. So nice and easy, let's go over to the open amount and click on our statement line wizard. And over on the left hand side, I can start getting Twinfield to recognise and learn that transaction. So it's going to speed up the matching process every time it sees my customer, the Pioneer. Just need to enter in the code and click on the Open Items button. Okay, so from my list I can see that I've got an amount for 7,900 and there's nothing that I can actually match it off against at the moment. So I'm going to leave this on account so I can match at another time. So I'll just go over to my next record and yet again I have another customer that I need Twinfield to recognise. And I'm simply just repeating the steps again like I did for my customer, the Pioneer. Okay, so this time on this transaction, they've paid a little short. So I'm just going to leave this transaction on account. And if I now click save, I'm going to go back to my main statement area and I'm going to post this bank statement. Okay, so if I need to make any amendments to the way that any of the transactions are matched, I can go back to provisional transactions. So I can go back to my home screen and just pick up the tile that we applied earlier. if I click on the line for my Barclays Bank, and then just click on the edit pencil over on the right so I can edit the transaction. And this is a transaction being brought up for me in edit mode. So I can see that I have a transaction here for British Telecom. And if I want to unmatch that transaction, I can simply just click on the padlock and it will free that transaction up for me. And if I choose to just take off that invoice reference number and then save the transaction, I can save it again as provisional. And what that's now done is left that invoice, it's left the invoice on the account as an open item. If I go back into my bank statement, I can once again just click on the invoice button, and once I've clicked on the invoice button, I can see which other invoices are now available to me. I can see that's the only invoice, so I can reselect it again. Okay, so this time I'm going to make this transaction final. Okay, so now that I've made this transaction final, all of the transactions that have been made final will appear for me in my matching area. So if I want to go ahead and match off some transactions, it could just be that, like we demonstrated, that they hadn't paid the right amount and I wanted to just leave it on account. Or it could just be a timing issue between you issuing a payment, maybe you had to pay for goods in advance and then you receive the invoice later. How do you match those type of transactions? So under Twinfield, if you go to the financial professionals, you can go down to matching, and this is going to allow you to match by customer and supplier. So if I open up my supplier matching, and if I click next, this is going to bring up all of my supplier invoices that have been posted final, whether or not they have a matching bank transaction or not. You can choose to sort the columns by customer or supplier, and that way just makes it a lot easier if you've got a bank transaction and an invoice which is outstanding. So I can see here that I've got a nice bank transaction for one of my insurance companies, and I've also got an invoice which is outstanding there as well. So in this screen, I can actually search and see whether I've got a couple of transactions which are a like-for-like match. So I've got some transactions under an account called Howard Accountants. So for example, I can see that I've got a long list of invoices and bank transactions which are available to me, which I can match off. So simply all you need to do is under the matching column is just tick the appropriate transaction. So I can see the invoice number is 2016-134, and then if you've got the same reference number for the invoice, I can just put a tick against that line, and you can see now that I no longer have a remainder over the two lines. The matching button is now active for me, so I can now just click matching. Okay, so how about if you want to part allocate or allocate a credit note off against an invoice? So I'm going to head out of my supplier matching and take a look at one of my customers. So under customer matching, I have one of my customers called Stars and Stripes. And if I select the code and click next, it's going to just list the transactions just for that customer, which makes it a lot more easier for me to actually match. So for example, I can see here that I've got a credit note of £600 which needs to be offset against the invoice above. So firstly, just select the credit note. Then you have this extra option here called switch, which will just give us some advanced matching functionality. So now I can go up to the line of the invoice and I can type in the amount that I would like to match. So once you tab out of the field, I can now click on matching. And if I click on the switch button again, then it will just take me back to just my basic matching functionality. And I can see that I've got a couple of other transactions which can be matched off, or I can choose to match them off at a later time. Okay, so let's return back to the desktop. Okay, so if you've actually matched something and you've matched it incorrectly and everything is final, but you need to unmatch that transaction, there is a way that you can get these transactions unmatched is by using our undo matching tool. But there's a few things you need to do first. So firstly, let's go down to the reports, and under our reports you have a matching report. And this report is a general ledger report, so under general ledger should have a report called matched transactions. So in our matched transactions report, you can choose to filter by suspense, customer, or supplier. So let's just say we want to filter by supplier, and I'm going to pick on my customer Stars and Stripes. And click next. Okay, so I want to check out the invoice that I've just matched against the credit note, and if I've matched that incorrectly, I want to make sure that I can undo the matching. So the first thing you would need to do is make sure you take a note of the actual match number. So I can see the match number on Stars and Stripes is 19. The undo matching tool will need to be downloaded from our knowledge base. So if you click on the knowledge base icon, and then in the search for field, just type in undo. It will come back with a list of solutions. And the second one is undo matching using web services. You just click into the option. It will give you a little bit of information about the undo matching tool, but you'll need to download the unmatched tool to your downloads folder. So once you've downloaded the file, if I just go over to my downloads, you'll see just a file, just an extraction file like this. So once you double click on the file, it will give you the option to extract, and you just click on the extract button, and you need to browse to the folder where you would like the file to be extracted to. Okay, so once you've done those two steps, the next step is going to be opening and running the unmatched tool. Okay, so let me just browse back to my folder. Okay, so I do have a folder called Webinar, and in my Webinar folder I should have my Unmatched tool. And in that folder then I will be able to just undo my matching by just running the tool. So you need to click in the Twinfield Undo Matching folder, and then you'll have this executable icon where the Undo Matching tool sits. So let's click into Undo Matching. And you will be presented with a login box. So under this login box is going to be the same details you're going to use to enter into Twinfield. Okay, and then once you've entered those details, just click Login. It will come up with another window, and it will ask you just to choose which company you would like to use to do the undo matching. So just select your company, And once you've selected your company, you need to choose your dimension type. So my dimension type is going to be debtors, and you need to put in your dimension code. Okay, so if you don't know the dimension code, then simply just go back to the beginning of the report. And then under the reports, I've got stars and stripes, and I can see that my code is 2011. So let's type in 1011 and also the match number, which is 19. And let's click undo. Okay, so if you get this error message, it just means that the company that you've selected, the transaction was not found. So I've probably just gone in and selected the wrong office code. So I can cancel out of that window, and I can just go in and just try and just make sure that I select the correct company. Okay, right, so the company I should have selected was GL Training 06. So let's just try that one more time. So I'm just going to go back in and run the executable. Okay, and once it comes up with the pop-up window, I'm just going to scroll down and select the right company. So second time lucky on a Friday. Okay, so I can see that I've got my company, which is 06. Let's just see whether or not that is the right one. It's here. Right, so once again, dimension code is for our debtors, and the code for my my customer is 1011. And let's see if we're going to be second time lucky with the match number, and let's click undo. Okay, so I know that the undo matching has worked. It's given me the little pop-up window, so I can click OK and cancel out of the rest of the screens. So now I can refresh my report, and once I've refreshed my report, okay, should be able to see that that transaction has now disappeared off my screen. So let me just go back to the actual matching window. And under my customers, I'm just going to go back and have a look at stars and stripes. Okay, so I've got all my transactions back from stars and stripes, and I'm actually back to where I was before I did the matching. Okay, so during the webinar, we had a look at customer and supplier matching and had a look at our bank transactions. One other area we just need to look at is our allocation rules, but we've actually worked through using the undo matching tool. So if I go back to our allocation rules, and the unallocated rules can be found under our cash and bank area, and we've got our allocation rules button just here. So once you click into it, it will just give you all the rules that would have been created through posting your bank statements. Okay, so the more you use your e-bank statements, the more Twinfield is going to learn how the transactions look in your company. Okay, so I'm going to take the time to open up and ask you if you've got any questions, and also just like to mention again that this is the last in the series of our webinars, and if there's any webinars that you would like to see in the future, please do submit that feedback back to us. Okay, so we've got some questions which have just come through, and there's one that's come through from James, and James mentioned that his PIN wasn't working. So James, can you just give me a little bit more information on that? Because there shouldn't be any PIN numbers with Twinfield or to log into the webinar. So if you can just maybe either just submit that question through to our support team, I would be grateful. Thank you. Okay, so I've got another question which says, I'm trying to match the bank payment to a supplier invoice with FX differences, but when I click onto the bank transaction, the magnifying glass icon doesn't appear. Why would that be? Okay, maybe Georgina, it could be a couple of reasons. This transaction that you're actually matching, is it a foreign currency bank account that you're doing the matching in? If that's the case, then the magnifying glass will not appear. So I would suggest that if you can book both of the bank payment and the transaction as final, then you'll be able to use the matching window. And once you use the matching window, you may need to use the switch function, which is going to give you some advanced functionality. And there you'll be able to set both of the classes to difference on exchange. Okay, if there's any differences. Okay, so Bernie, if you do leave those transactions on account, then what you can do, you've got the flexibility if they're final to go into the matching screen and actually match those off. And that's going to be one of the probably just one of the tasks that you can do just to kind of tidy up those accounts. If they've actually paid you, short, you can always just match the rest of the you can always match the transaction and just treat it as a payment and just treat it as a part payment against the transaction. So when you're in the bank matching screen, for example, let me just see if I can go back into my demo if I've got something available. Okay, so let me just go back into the bank area. And I'm going to go back into bank statements. I'm just going to check and see if I've got a transaction that just needs to be matched off. So just bear with me. Okay, so let me just go in and undo the matching on this transaction. So for example, if I just simply click on this transaction that I have here and let me just recognize it first of all and choose it's a customer and just choose the code. If I now just go on the open items and I can see that I've got an underpayment, so it's 5275 and the invoice is 5295. I can actually just tick the transaction and from the bottom just say that I want to process the difference as a part payment and then click OK. And that should actually just take that away for you and just leave the £20 outstanding on the account. And that should actually let you just go ahead and save that. Okay, if it's an overpayment, I would just suggest leave it on account and then you can manage it yourself through the matching window. Okay, so we've got a message here from James. So it's got using the switch matching setting, how do you use the exchange difference option? Okay, so if you have a transaction, James, all you could do is when you go into the matching option, you can set both lines to advanced matching, to exchange rate difference, for example, and it will match off the transaction. I don't have one available to show you, but if I just give you a demonstration, I'm just going to pick on one of my suppliers. Okay, so let's just say, for example, I'll just pick on, let's just pick on these two amounts, and I want to click on the switch button, and I want to pick up this amount here, which is for £1,500. So I'm just going to type in, I've got my 153120, and I'm going to just change the class to exchange difference. Okay, so once I've changed the class to exchange difference, it tells me I've got zero remainder, and I can click the matching button. So that's how you would need to treat any of your foreign currency FX rates, and that will just actually clear that down so it tidies up the ledger for you. Okay, so we've got another question from Susan, and Susan says, do you have to finalise a transaction to match it? Okay, so Susan, if you're matching it through the bank statement, then no, you don't have to finalise the transaction. But if you want to use the advanced matching functionality that I'm in at the moment, then yes, you will only be able to see the transactions in this area once they are final. Okay, so Cassie said, I would like to get link for sales invoicing, which I've missed. No worries, Cassia. We are having a few technical difficulties uploading the last webinar, but our team is looking into it, and we will get that webinar up and on the website shortly. Okay, so Andrew's mentioning, how do you deal with small differences when the customer pays you slightly more than the invoice, just say by a penny? How do you process those differences? Okay, so Andrew, it could just be a case that you kind of agree with either your customer to kind of write off those balances, and if that's the case and it's made final, you can do exactly the same thing in the screen. So let me just go and choose another supplier. Okay, so I've got quite a few invoices here for Howard, so I'm going to just choose my two £300 invoices. And if I just go and use the switch function, what you will find is that under the class you have got an option for write-off. But if you are going to use the write-off option, Howard, Andrew, what you would need to make sure is that you have the correct nominal code or a nominal code set in your accounting settings, which can be found by just going under your settings option, and under settings going to company settings, and where you've got your company settings option, you have a tab marked system accounts. Just make sure that you have a nominal code in here. Either you've got it set to bad debt, or it's set to bank charges, or a nominated account that or a suspense account. But just make sure there's something in the debit and the credit option before you choose the write-off option. Okay, so Pierre's asking, on which platform did you run the undo matching tool, Mac or PC? Pierre, I actually ran it on a PC. Not sure whether or not it's going to run on a Mac. I haven't tested it, but I can actually just ask our support team for you. And yes, Paul, you are right. You can undo matching without using the matching tool. However, if you've actually matched off transactions and you do not have the magnifying glass option, so let's just go and find my bank statement, and I'll explain this a little bit, and I'll explain this a little bit better. So let me just go into my reports and find my last bank transaction. Actually, I'm going to just change my mind and use another report which is under my input overview. So just bear with me one moment. Okay, so let me just go in and click into one of my bank statement lines. Okay, so I've gone in here and I've actually previewed my bank statement lines. And like you rightly mentioned, you can just click into this window, and where I've got a padlock, I can click on the padlock and it will undo the matching for me. But if you've matched credit notes off against an invoice using the matching window, you won't be able to have that functionality. So it's in those circumstances that you can go ahead and use the unmatching tool. But it's going to be in, it's going to be kind of like in, the extreme circumstances where you don't have either a magnifying glass or the invoice finder button available to you. So as you can see, that even though this transaction is final, I can still click on the magnifying glass. Okay, so on Honna's asking, how do you apply small discounts? Okay, so if you need to apply if you do need to apply discounts, you do have in the in the bank statement area an option for discounts, and you'll just use the option which says deductions. So if I just go back into my bank statement, okay, so once I'm back in my bank statement and it's opened up for me, if I just click on the open items button, okay, you do have an option to process the difference, and you have the option here as deduction. But like I mentioned previously when we were talking about write-offs, you will need to make sure that you have nominated a nominal code in your company settings for deductions. Otherwise, you will get an error, but it's going to be handled exactly the same way. Okay, so Catherine's just asking, will you be sending out instructions on how to go through the unmatching method? Catherine, we already have a YouTube video available. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Twinfield UK, then under the Twinfield UK, there is a video on the undo matching, which is ready and available for you. Okay, so James is just saying, when matching through the electronic bank statement upload, if making multiple part payments in 1 month, only the first payment can be matched, and subsequently the invoice doesn't appear when you go to match the payment. James, you're absolutely right, that does happen. And what I would suggest is just make the 1 part payment, and once you finish posting the rest of your bank statement, just post it. And when you post it, it's going to post as provisional, and then you'll be able to edit the actual bank statement through the provisional transactions, and then it will allow you to start adding in more payments against that invoice. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us throughout all of our webinar sessions. Your feedback is really important to us, so if you do want to see any more webinars in the future, please just submit them through, and our marketing team will pick up those details and pass it on to the professional services team. But once again, thank you very much and have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.